Welcome to Destination Newry, and in the studio today we have Councillor Brenden Curran, who's been a councillor for 28 years in Newry and Mourne District Council. Brenden, where were you born?
I was born in Newry. I was born in probably the oldest street in Newry, which was Castle Street. Very historical in every sense of the word.
Wow.
So,
what was it like growing up there?
Castle Street was good. Newry was good. It was very exciting times I was growing up in. I wouldn't change the times. It was a great time to be born and to be living in the Newry area and in Ireland in general. There was a lot happening. You had a very close community in Castle Street. All the doors were always open. There was a great gang of lads in the street, and there was always some development to be at. There was 2 schools in the street, so you had plenty of places to play and mess about. And so it was good. Castle Street was good and Newry was good. Well,
for the benefit of the viewers, Brenden, Castle Street would have been the back of Newry Cathedral car park area?
Yeah, just where I was born, directly opposite where the Sacred Heart School was. I was one of the few people who were actually born in the street. I was actually born on a cold December night on the ground in the kitchen. So there was no Daisy Hill because it just didn't happen. My mother had to get somebody to run down to the corner where my father was with all the other workmen to get him up, and it was too late. Frank Mullen had to come and do the whole business on the floor in the kitchen, so that's where it all started for me.
And in them days there was no television or, you know...
Well, funny enough, that's a good point, Tony. We probably, and it's not blowing through, my father was the first in Castle Street to have a TV. And it was black and white, and it had wee doors at the side to let the air in to cool it down. And everybody in the street came in to see it because nobody else had one. You could have seen one in McGowan's shop on Hill Street. You could look through the window at it, but nobody had one. So from the very onset, we had one, and then they could no longer afford it. But right at the very start, we were the first one in the street to have it, and it was a huge novelty. Batman, Roy Rogers, and all that stuff. So it really was a big...
I suppose all the neighbours and coming around to get
up. Somebody come in to see Bob Corn's TV. It was amazing.
So what schools did you go to, Brenden?
Well, I went to the primary school, which was just on the same street, so there was no such thing as being sick or not being able to go to school because you're in the street. So
that was the Abbey, obviously.
That was the Abbey Primary. And then I went to the school where I was threatened I would go if I didn't behave myself. I went to St. Joseph's. So I did go where I was threatened to go, and I have to say it was a great school. I had no interest in school or education, and I'm sure they tried their best for me, but I had other notions and plans. So I came out of school with a razor, and I didn't even shave. That's the only thing I came out with. I came out with absolutely no educational things except a razor. I won first place in poetry, and I got a plaque for that in my 4th year, and that was my biggest educational attainment at that stage.
What do you mean they give you a razor? What can you explain that?
Well, I mean, when you left school, we were like leaving prison, they give you a coat, but when you leave school in those days, your going away present was a razor. It was an open razor for shaving, and I had one, and I didn't shave for many years after it, so it was of no value to me.
I see you're still using it, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay, Brenden, what sports did you take part in?
In school?
In school, yeah.
In school I would have been very good at the high jump. Always came 3rd at the high jump, and the 1st and 2nd place were always won by the same 2 fellas, and I always came 3rd. I played football for a while, Gaelic goalkeeper, and I was useless, and I had no interest in it. And the only sport that I really liked was swimming, and I've always stuck with swimming. I'm a swimming teacher, and I have great interest in swimming, and I like swimming, and I still teach today.
So you're still a sporting person even
today?
Well,
I would swim 3 times a week, and I teach swimming on and off. So,
what are your main hobbies, or have you any crafts or things like that?
I like the garden.
You're a garden man.
I do like the garden. I like playing a wee bit of guitar. I learned a bit of guitar in prison, so I've kept that going. And I do a wee bit of photography. And I've 3 hens, 3 cats, and a dog. So I like animals as well. So all in that.
So you've enough to keep you going.
Enough to keep me going. Yeah.
Hobby.
Internet and the computer. I'll be very much involved in the computer and stuff like that. So
very good.
I've moved with the times.
You've moved with the times. Very good. So you're a bit of a web wizard nowadays, Brenden.
I would know quite a wee bit about it. You know, I would be
Did you
able to-
shun technology back in the day?
No, I was
Or
very
did you?
hungry. I was very hungry for it, and I would have a good interest in it. Years ago, whenever I left school, I got a job with Francis Brackenbury as a television engineer, and that sort of put an interest in technology and stuff in me, because he was so gifted and so clever, and that sort of stuck with me. So whenever computers came about, I sort of immersed myself in it, and have happily had a good relationship with him. You know.
Very good. Francis Brackenbury, he was down at the bottom of Water Street,
Water
wasn't
Street,
when,
yeah.
where the music shop is now,
Yeah,
is it?
yeah.
Yeah.
Francis was very, very gifted and
A clever man, wasn't
very, very clever. Yeah, very, very badly invalided, but was a very clever fella. You know, so.
he? Just worked on regardless, more or
Well,
less.
he did. He was in advance of his times and very capable. You know, and was renowned for his skills. But it was good crack. I would have good crack with Francis. I used to have to put him to bed and stuff at night, and if I forgot to put him to bed, Francis didn't go to bed. You know, so if I was down, if I was out having a good time and realised at 3 a.m. I didn't put Francis to bed, Francis was sitting in the chair because he couldn't get up the stairs because he was so badly invalided. So the reception of that would have been frosty, to say the least. So on the way up the stairs, Francis' head might have hit the beam by accident, as usual. So it was a love-hate relationship with me and Francis. You know,
So that's whenever you were young then, did you?
16-ish, yeah.
And what else were you involved in? You know, like when you left school, did you?
When I left school, I got a great job in Quinns and Milestone, which was a tea blending place. Upstairs, I had a steel floor, and we were tea blenders, and you had to blend all the tea on the steel floor. So you would get a list of what teas to blend, and you had to turn it 3 times on this big steel floor with big long-tailed shovels. And then I discovered that the girls who was working in the middle floor weren't getting paid the same rate as the men, and I sort of harnessed my first sort of political protest and kicked up, and I sort of told management that if they didn't take the girls up to our standards, that we would walk out. So I ended up being the only one who walked out and left the job, which was a big loss because it was good money. It really was good money. So that was one of my first political protests, and I think it was the right thing to do, because women should have been treated the same as men.
Indeed.
You know, and for years after that, you know, women in Newry still weren't treated the right way. You know, certain pubs and clubs they couldn't get into, and I would have took a stand against that as well. So,
See, the modern day viewer will probably find this difficult to believe. You know, it's only when you think back to the historical days. You know.
well, I mean, I became a member of an associate member of the independent club because I couldn't become a full member because I was an ex-prisoner. And I asked the question to the chairman, why was there no women members of the club? And the chairman sort of disgustingly looked at me and said, because they're not. And I says, I know they're not, but why are they not? And he said, because they've never been. I says, I know they've never been, but why are they not allowed to be members? So he then quickly asked the next question. He just run out of, without telling me to F off, he just run out of things to say to me. He just wasn't taking it anymore. And that's within my living memory. I mean, the independent club, women weren't allowed in during the day on Saturdays or Sundays, but they were allowed in at night if men signed them in. So, you know, and that's within the last 30 years. So, you know, it's major changes, and people won't understand it, but that was a big thing. I mean, why couldn't a woman go in?
Yeah.
There was pubs that had snugs where women weren't allowed into the main body of the pub. So, I mean, that's not a million years ago.
There's a massive change.
Yeah.
Going by today, Brenden. I
Yeah.
mean, if even your father was about today, I'm sure he would get an eye
big
opener.
time, yeah.
You know.
And there's some people would like it the way it was, you know.
Yeah.
Personally, you know.
Well, tell me this, Brenden. What's your favourite music or bands? Have you?
Oh, where would I start with that? I like Van Morrison. I like Joe Cocker. And Steely Dan. I like Steely Dan. I'm listening to Steely Dan and Buzz Gags at the minute. So I'm fortunate enough to work in an industry where I get to see all my heroes, the most of them apart from the ones that are dead. So I love music, and I'm able to avail of it on a regular basis. You know, I can see groups now free that I only dreamt of years ago, you know, in the 80s whenever they were in their heyday. So this weekend I'm seeing Beyonce. So
Well, that's enough about that. But I'm talking about music, Brenden.
when
If
she's
you don't
going,
mind.
of course, yeah. So well, no, I enjoy that because I have a good interest in music, and so I play a bit of the guitar, and so.
Very good. So your music's a part of your life, then,
Yeah,
obviously.
very much so.
What's your favourite holiday destination?
I don't really have one. I used to love Sligo when our family was younger, but I mean, anywhere at the minute's good to go.
Out of the country or in the country?
Other way, it's just I've nowhere in particular that I would love to go. This year we're actually going to Spain. My wife's brother was married there 12 years ago in the Basque Country, and we all went over for the wedding, and we're all going to go back again this year. You know, the whole wider family, so that'll be good fun.
That should be fun.
Yeah.
What's your favourite food and or drink?
Food. Very easy pleased. You know, I'd be a creature of habit. I would steak, and more steak. If I'd go into a restaurant, like I would never venture for something new. I would always stick to the old thing. Plenty of spuds and my mother's stew, stuff like that. You know, and hard to beat those
good
recipes.
Traditional Irish food.
Yeah, Irish food. I mean, Mrs. Crossy, who we both know, who passed away there recently. My daughter pushed me into going up and getting the recipe for her soda bread off her. And we went up and we filmed her making it. She told me to come up on a Thursday when she was making it, and she was 94 or 96, and she allowed us to film her making it. She gave us a recipe and we watched her doing it, and we have that.
That's terrific.
So, and she told me, she said, you know, this is a very old recipe. She said, this is 300 years old. And I said, is it? She said, yeah. She said, you know, there's a story behind that recipe. She says that recipe saved our family home. I said, kiddo, how's that? She says, well, we lived in Mayo Bridge, or I think it was out between Mayo Bridge and Durleckie at the time, and the Redcoats, the British Army Redcoats, come out 300 years ago, and they were carrying out reprisals and were burning down houses for some Republican attacks was carried out on them, and they came to Mrs. Crossy's house, and when they came into the house, there was freshly baked soda bread and jugs of fresh cream on the table for the family, because they were a very cooking orientated family, and they sat and they drank and ate the bread, and they went across the road and they burnt down O'Gorman's house, who would be T.R. O'Gorman's family house.
My goodness.
And the reason for not burning down Crossy's house is because they could come back on occasions and avail of, even though they stole it, that hospitality, whereas if they'd burned it out they wouldn't. And so it really was a unique recipe to have, 300 years old, and if you knew Mrs. Crossy or Alice as you do, I mean, their bread is unbelievable.
Well, it speaks volumes, and not only that, they all lived to a big age.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, Alice was 100. Catherine died, which is 94, 96, and the sister Mary, I think, is 93 or 4 at the minute as well. So
it's a good recipe, obviously.
Huge history with them, and
there is.
So cultured, you know. So.
And very knowledgeable people.
Oh, absolutely, very clever people, and were very willing to hand on their knowledge, I have to say. Great family, yeah.
It's great to be handed down like that. Yeah. How do you like to unwind or relax, you know, in the evenings or
I just like to be home, Tony. I work, unfortunately it's mostly weekends and all weekends at concerts and stuff, and I just like to be home. I don't particularly want to go anywhere or be anywhere. I just like to be home.
And relax.
Just relax, watch the TV, mess about the house.
Well, who inspires you, Brenden, and why?
I'm a very hard person to inspire, I have to say, Tony. The women in my life have inspired me. My mother, my wife, my father inspired me great. People like Mrs. Crossy inspired me. I would find it very hard to find somebody who would be worth looking up to, I have to say, but those are some of the people who would inspire me. Our party leader, Gerry Adams, is in a league of his own, and what he's had to personally suffer, and our party, but I think he has always been out there in advance of all the rest. And so I would be inspired by Gerry Adams, and would have great time for him personally and our politics. So that would be who would inspire me.
Very good. What was your proudest day as a councillor?
What was a councillor? Well, proudest days, you know, you could have a few of them. You know, when my children was born and when I got married. As a councillor, it would be hard getting elected, I think. You know.
Yeah.
Well,
you were. I'm sorry to break your word. You were the first Sinn Féin councillor elected in Newry and Mourne District Council.
I was, and I was the first in, I think it was 67 years the first Republican, Sinn Féin Republican, elected in Newry. And in those days it was very hard to get anybody to stand, because it was a very dangerous time, and to represent people who didn't have a voice, I thought was a very proud moment, and to actually pull it off, because lots of people in those days voted for the establishment parties, and our brand of politics wasn't very easily to sell to people and to get people engaging, even though we had support. The media, you had censorship, you had shooting of us dead, attacks, imprisonment. So it was very, very hard to get our message across in a fair and open way like everybody else. So I think that probably was my proudest political moment, was to get elected, to give people a voice who didn't have one, people who I seen were downtrodden and abused and murdered on the streets, and the victims. So I think that was my proudest day. You couldn't top that.
Have you represented all factions of our community?
Well, I would like to think so, and everybody would like to think, but I really did. At that stage I was asked by the Republican movement to become a councillor. That was 1985. I was also getting married in 1985. I had been in prison for many years, and I got out and I found it impossible to get a job. And finally I did get a full-time job with a pension. And the dilemma I had and my wife was, for me to be able to stand as a councillor, I would have to give that job up, which was a big sacrifice, particularly in the light of the fact that you went on the dole and you get next to nothing for being a councillor. You get next to nothing now, but then it was even worse. So that was a big sacrifice for me, and it was one which I done and done willingly, because it was the right thing to do, and I've no regrets about it. I would love to have still, have been the lifeguard and had that constant income, whereas I just had to forgo it, and that was a big decision. So that was one of the big choices I had to make. Is
there a big change in your representation nowadays? The diversity of Newry and Mourne, it's a wide diverse of different communities.
There is, I think I would have a peculiar type of following, which would be outside of the the Republican following, and I've continuously stood in different areas, been moved around, and it's hard to keep a following. But I have people who like the Republican brand, and also who like my brand of it. I don't suffer fools gladly, and if people come to me and I think that they should be told the truth, and I tell them the truth, whether that suits them or not. And sometimes that doesn't go down well with people.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes people think you should be two-faced and say the right thing just to get people's votes, and I don't do that, and I never will do that. So it's hard to be current. It's hard to be relevant to people all the time, and I've been successful in that, and that's very hard to do, and anybody who's elected will realise, to get constantly elected is very, very hard. And I think part of that is if you're genuine about what you do, and if you have a good workload, and if you follow up things. And it's easier now to be a Republican representative. They're not killing you in the street and victimising you or your family, and I think that's an unseen side of it.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not easy being a Republican. I was sitting at the table the other night with my children, and we still have that threat, and the worry of that threat of danger, particularly to our children and ourselves. So it's not easy being an elected representative,
mm-hmm.
and you can be victimised and ostracised as a result of it, and your family. So it's not an easy road to go.
Mm-hmm.
If you were middle of the road politics, or if you were some of those other non-contentious parties, politics would be a doddle. But the brand that I've followed has not been easy, I have to say.
I suppose especially with the Russians and Eastern Bloc countries and Brazil. They're coming in. All these people are coming in from all around the world. I think it's great myself. I
have to say I welcome
challenges. Is it?
I welcome the new nationals and embrace it, and particularly the Polish community would do bits and pieces with regard to the Polish community, and there is people who, today actually put on on Facebook, you know, racist comments about, you know, they're over here taking all our jobs. What a load of nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people who are over here are working their butts off. They're doing work that lots of other people mightn't bother their backside doing. And I think they add greatly to our community in every way.
Yeah.
They keep our schools going, they do the work and create work as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I have no problems about the change
So,
in times.
have you got new challenges then with these new diversity groups, you know?
Well, a lot of them are inclined to stay in their own groups, and it's only in dire situations where they reach out to our communities. But I mean, there's a lot of things going wrong in those communities which they also keep to themselves as well, which I think we all need to make an effort to crack and to help them resolve.
Well, what are your hopes for Newry and Mourne in the future, Bren?
To grow, to have facilities, and for them to be open and equal to everybody. I think we need, particularly the council, I think we need vision in our council. I think there's a severe lack of vision in our council, particularly with regard to facilities and things like that. I mean, we've just recently opened a mountain bike track in Rostrevor, and that's great. And the same Slieve Gullion, we've opened a children's multi-activity playground. But we seem to stop. Once we do it, we seem to stop. We don't develop. I mean, there's not enough car parking spaces. There should be camping facilities. You know, we need to be building. It's seen as, you know, you've done enough once you've done it. Whereas if it was a business, if it was my business or your business, you'd be saying, that's great. How can I add to it? What else would people be looking for? And I think that's where our council's fallen down. And there is one or two in the council who has vision, but it's down to one or two. And those people who do have any push in them, they're being inundated. And I think there needs to be a whole rationalisation, and we need to be maybe buying in from the business community, people who will put that business edge on, who will get a return for the ratepayers' money that's spent on it. Because that's what it's about. It's about getting a return. It's not enough just to provide it. You need to get a return so you can provide all the facilities. And I think that there's not that attitude to it on the council.
Very good. What are your fears for Newry and Mourne?
My fears is the violence that takes place day and daily, the unseen assaults, the nighttime economy, the brutality that goes on in our streets, and nobody seems to care. The amount of people who visit Daisy Hill with assaults, which goes unrecorded. I mean, it doesn't show up in any statistics anywhere. It's seen as private, confidential information. And if we seen the true amount of it, then we might take steps about it. And the amount of violence every weekend is very large, and a lot of it's drug related. And I just don't think that anybody's doing anything about it. I think that some of our premises are, I know it's hard for them, but there seems to be an acceptable level of violence on our streets. You know, as long as nobody gets killed, it doesn't matter if somebody kicks your head in and you end up in the brain injury ward. As long as you don't end up on the death statistics, nobody's really going to, you know, kick up too much about it.
Yeah.
And the amount of people that suffer serious head injuries is colossal. And I mean, I remember meeting a young Polish man, a very fit, able, fine lad, who actually crashed into my son's car. And looked at the car, there was no problem with the car, and, you know, told him there was no bother. And I found out, you know, just a short time ago that man is in a vegetative state, that he got brutalised on the streets in Newry. And those are the figures which just slip off the radar. You know, you don't see them, and that to me is shocking. And the fact that nobody's doing anything serious about it is shocking. I really think that the nighttime economy needs to be badly shook up, and I think it needs to be led from the council. And until it happens to some of their children, I don't think anybody's going to take it seriously. I just think it's terrible what's going on, and it is going on, and it's been allowed to go on, and I see it because of the industry I work in, and I know how bad it is in other places. But in Newry is where I live, and that's where I'm concerned about most. And I just don't see people taking it seriously enough.
And is it down, well, do you think it's down to the council, the police, community groups, or who, you know, what way can I rectify this?
Well, I think the council must take a lead in it, and Why do I say that? I say that because the council gives the entertainment licences to the premises. Now, if those premises aren't proactive, both inside and outside, and I very importantly say outside, it seems it's all right to do what you want outside the premises. As long as it's not done in the premises, or if somebody's caused a problem, we'll throw them out of premises and then that's the problem solved. It's not it's solved. You know, and the police will verify that, but I mean there needs to be a joint effort. There needs to be a licensing issue where premises need to take control of what happens immediately outside and maybe to the middle of the road. Now the premises turn and say, oh, we're not insured. Well, they just need to get themselves insured to do that, or else maybe they shouldn't get a license, because it is so serious and people are being so badly injured. And if they're serious about their business, then they'll take the outside serious as well. The other thing is about neighbours. You know, people shouldn't have to listen to the noise, and people over in Francis Street have had injured as well. And until people take seriously, then it won't be taken seriously as an issue. So I think there needs to be movement with regard to that, and I've been saying that until I'm blue in the face, and it seems like I'm going to continue to say it, but hopefully somebody will listen somewhere along the line.
Yeah, indeed. What can be done to unify that all the diverse groups in our community? For instance, you know, is there such a thing as a community concert, or is there anything can be done by the council and or other groups, community groups, to get the ordinary people of Newry to know who their new neighbours are?
Well, we spoke earlier on about Castle Street and when the doors were open and all, and Ireland and Newry in particular was always very well known for that, and it's not the same anymore. You know, people aren't as friendly or as neighbourly in some areas as they used to be years ago, because of the different threats, and as drugs or the fear of drugs and robberies and all the rest of that. Some of the community associations do great work, I have to say. They could always do better, but I mean some of them do good work. And I think that's the type of thing. I don't think they should be allowed to stay satellite in their own groups. I think there needs to be outreach there. I think there needs to be hand holding and attracting them into our mainstream where you can, without offending their cultures. And I think we do that in schools and all the rest of that. But I think there does need to be more effort done on it, and there is more room for improvement. But I think there are lots of people doing good work. I mean, I was invited to the Polish school ceremony day there a few months ago, and it was great in the Abbey, to see all those young Polish children coming in and honouring their culture, and at the same time being involved in ours and playing a very active role in our community. So there's a fine line of trying to make them all Irish, and nobody wants them to be Irish, but I mean you do need to help them and help people who's actually maybe offending them or ripping them off or abusing them. I think that's one of the things we could do. So.
Very good. And finally, Brenden, can you give a message to people of Newry and Mourne from Destination Newry's studio here today?
Well, I think Destination Newry is a small sample of the type of things that's going on in Newry. Local people have an idea and they're going forward with it, and it's touching all the lives west through the sporting medium, and Destination Newry will be very much up for that and involved in that, from a sporting point of view. Is I think the people of Newry need to be out there, and particularly with councillors, they need to elect people that is going to fairly represent them, and they need to see through some of the hype, and they need to call their councillor. Sometimes I think people think councillors and the police have a crystal ball and they know everything's going on, unless you ring somebody and complain to them, and then get back to them. Because I'll give you an example. If Tony Smith contacted me because he had a broken back door, I'll contact the local housing executive. They'll say, yeah, Brent, no problem, we'll sort that out. And maybe 5 times out of 10 they don't bother their backside. Tony Smith goes away with the attitude that Brent Curran never bothered his backside, and then he gets on to somebody else and somebody else. So it's a two-way thing, because you've contacted in the first place, and or maybe, once I contact the housing executive official or the council official or the dole official, I'm assuming that they've done what they're paid to do. But it's not always the case.
So, and a message for the youth of today, Brenden. Have you got due to the economic situation? I mean, there's not much money going about. I'm sure there's some very clever youth out there who would love to get going and create something big. Have you any message for the youth of today?
Well, Newry is blessed with, I think it's the biggest, youngest population. And I mean, you've seen from all the schools, and it doesn't have to be the high schools, that there's a very high standard of education in Newry. I think people should stay where they can at home. I think this business of going away foreign is a false economy. And I think they should be trying to develop and assist the local businesses and staying in their own community where possible. Because there's a brain drain, there's a sports drain, and there's a social drain. And it's all to the detriment of Newry. And when I was growing up, it was commonplace to go to England. I mean, all my brothers were sailors, they all went to sea. And Newry was to the loss of that. So where possible, where people can get their own businesses up and running, or stick with the local businesses. And push people like the council to lever in more business and to get more jobs and to fight for more jobs. Because I don't think they effectively do that, or actively do it in any shape or form worth talking about. And then in Newry you have the Belfast Derry situation, or Dublin. It never seems to happen in Newry. It always happens in those other places. So councillors need to be out fighting the corner to get the jobs, to get the investment. And people, I believe, are actively encouraged not to invest in Newry. And some of that is socially, and some of it from years ago used to be religious. Newry wasn't a place to invest money, and you seen factories would come, they would get the 10-year tax-free grant, and then the minute that was up, they would go away somewhere else. And people in Newry suffered just when they'd got to getting a lifestyle, then it was ripped out from under them. So Newry had a feature that lots of other towns hadn't got, where growing up men would stand around corners at night. There was places famous for it because there was no work. And the women didn't want them under their feet, so men stood at the corner yarning, and then maybe 11 o'clock at night they would go up home, and tomorrow would just be a repeat of that. And we're back in that workless era. But there is work out there, and if people put their minds to it, they can be inventive, and they can create enough employment to keep them going until the good times come.
Very good, Brenden. I think that about ties it all up today, Brenden. I'd really like to thank you on behalf of Destination Newry for coming into the studio. And one final message for anybody out there looking to, instead of saying somebody going away to emigrate to Australia, America or something, have you anything to try and keep them here, or any advice for them, Brenden?
No, well, wealth is only one part of life, and if you can keep going, as I said, until the good times come. I mean, emotionally you're leaving your family behind and all the rest of that, and sometimes it's good to go out there and spread your wings, but I mean, sometimes it's it's not so glossy in the places that you go, and sometimes there's hardship ahead as well. So think it out well. Don't go unless you're sure, and certainly don't go unless you have a means of getting home and something to fall back on, because you could be jumping from the pan into the fire. Yeah. So just ease off. I mean, I know there's a need at the minute, and there's also a bit of a fad, and people don't say that.
Yeah.
Young people are going away for that experience, and that's great. But sometimes people take advantage of you out there, and we've seen where other people have promised this and that, and it's not good intentions is behind it. So they just need to be very, very careful where they go and how they go about it.
Very good.
So just take it easy and be careful.
Be careful out there. Okay, well, Brenden, thanks again for coming into the studio, and this is Tony Smith for Destination Newry. Thanks again, Brenden.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.